It was Christmas Eve, 1958, the year the snow refused to stop falling. I remember it so clearly. By mid-afternoon, the world outside our window had turned into a vast, swirling sea of white. The roads were completely buried, the sky was a blank canvas, and the voice on the radio was a constant, gentle reminder, "Stay home, stay safe." It was official. No one was going anywhere that night. The local church had to cancel its much-anticipated Christmas service, a first in my memory. The grocery store, which was supposed to be a hub of last-minute holiday chaos, had pulled its shutters down early. Even the familiar clink of the milk truck's chains was absent from our street. It felt like the world had decided to take a day off, leaving us stranded in our homes. And yet, somehow, that quiet, snowed-in night became one of the most magical and memorable Christmases our family ever had. It taught me something profound about what the holiday spirit truly is, and it's a lesson that has stayed with me all these years. The storm began so gracefully, almost deceptively. Soft, delicate flakes started to dance and twirl past the windows. My siblings and I, like kids do, pressed our faces against the cold glass, our warm breath fogging up little circles on the pane, watching the spectacle unfold. It was beautiful, a perfect Christmas scene in the making. But as the sun began to set, painting the snowy landscape in hues of soft pink and lavender before disappearing, the storm's true character revealed itself. The gentle dance of snowflakes turned into a fierce blizzard. The wind began to howl, a mournful sound that whipped through the bare branches of the trees, making them look like skeletal figures swaying in the gale. Snow, now heavy and wet, piled up relentlessly against our doors, forming drifts that crept higher and higher. My dad, standing by the window, his hands clasped behind his back, let out a low whistle. "This is the worst I've seen in years," he said, his voice a mixture of awe and concern. My mom, ever the worrier, immediately thought of our neighbors. Her brow furrowed, and she voiced the thought that was on all our minds. "I'm worried about old Mr. Henderson down the street," she said softly. He lived alone in his little cottage, ever since his beloved wife, Eleanor, had passed away the spring before. The idea of him being all by himself in such a storm was unsettling. Driving was completely out of the question. Our car was little more than a white mound in the driveway. So Dad did what he always did. He took action. He bundled himself up in his heaviest coat, pulled on his thick boots, wrapped a scarf around his face until only his eyes were visible, grabbed a sturdy flashlight, and stepped out into the blizzard. Watching him from the window, he was just a small, determined figure battling through the waist-high snow, a single beam of light cutting through the darkness as he trudged down the street to check on our elderly neighbor. He was gone for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only about half an hour. When he finally returned, he was a walking snowman, covered from head to toe in a thick layer of white. But as he stomped the snow off his boots on the porch, he was grinning from ear to ear. "Mr. Henderson's fine," he announced, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "And get this, he's got a pot of soup on the stove big enough to feed the entire neighborhood." What happened next was something you couldn't have planned, something that unfolded as naturally as the falling snow itself. Word spread fast, but not through phone calls. The lines were down for many of us. Instead, it spread through footprints in the snow, a chain of concern and community forged in the blizzard. One by one, our neighbors started showing up at Mr. Henderson's little house. They emerged from the swirling white like brave explorers, wrapped in their warmest scarves and heaviest coats, their faces rosy from the cold, and each one of them carried something to share. Mrs. Gable from across the street brought a freshly baked apple pie, still warm from her oven. The Johnsons, who lived next door, arrived with a large thermos of steaming hot coffee. The Millers brought a handful of candles just in case, and their teenage son, a quiet boy named David, had his guitar slung over his shoulder. By 7 o'clock, Mr. Henderson's small, cozy living room was filled to the brim. It was crowded. There wasn't much space to move, but nobody seemed to care in the slightest. We were all just glad to be together, safe from the storm raging outside. And then, as if on cue, the power flickered once, twice, and went out, plunging the room into darkness. But there was no panic, only a collective sigh, followed by the quiet rustle of people finding the candles. Soon, the room was bathed in the warm, flickering glow of candlelight, their gentle light bouncing off the frosted windows and casting dancing shadows on the walls. Someone passed around mugs of rich, hot cocoa. Then David, sitting on a stool in the corner, shyly began to strum his guitar. A few soft notes filled the air, and then he started to sing Silent Night. At first, it was just his voice, clear and pure. But then, one by one, others joined in. And there we were, a room full of families who, on any other day, barely exchanged more than a polite nod, sitting shoulder to shoulder, our voices blending together in song by candlelight. Outside, the world was frozen solid, silent under a thick blanket of snow. But inside Mr. Henderson's house, it was the warmest place on earth. I remember my mom leaning over to me and whispering, her voice filled with a quiet wonder. Funny, isn't it? We can't even get out of our own houses, and yet I don't think we've ever felt closer as a neighborhood. She was right. That night, nobody talked about the presents they were hoping to get, or the ones they still needed to wrap. There was no mention of holiday sales or busy travel plans. Instead, we talked about memories. People shared stories of old Christmases from their childhoods, of loved ones who were no longer with us, and of the funny, quirky little things that make life worth remembering. Mr. Henderson, usually so reserved, told us a hilarious story about the time he and his wife tried to bake a Christmas turkey that was still frozen solid. We all laughed until tears streamed down our faces. For those few hours, it felt like time had stopped. There was no noise from the outside world, no sense of hurry, just the sound of laughter, the harmony of voices singing carols, and the soft, rhythmic patter of snow against the window panes. By the next morning, Christmas Day, the storm had passed. The sky had cleared to a brilliant, cloudless blue. When we opened the front door, the world outside looked like something out of a fairy tale. Every tree branch was heavy with a perfect layer of pristine snow, and the rooftops across the neighborhood sparkled and glittered in the bright morning sun. It was breathtakingly beautiful. One by one, we all stepped outside, blinking against the intense brightness, waving to each other across the perfectly white, untouched lawns. Then, Mr. Johnson, from his porch, yelled out with a booming laugh, "Coffee still hot over at Henderson's?" And everyone laughed. The storm had locked us in, yes, but in doing so, it had also opened something within us. It had rekindled a sense of togetherness, a genuine connection that we hadn't felt in years. That Christmas, the greatest gift we received was each other. I've seen many Christmases since that day in 1958. I've seen them with towering trees adorned with bright, twinkling lights, piles of beautifully wrapped new gifts, and streets bustling with festive crowds. But none of them, not a single one, has ever felt quite like that one. Because that year, when the entire world seemed to stop, our hearts didn't. They opened up. We were reminded of what Christmas truly meant. It wasn't about the presents under the tree, or the elaborate plans, or the decorations. It was about the people you share it with. It was about warmth and kindness, and finding light in the darkness, together. Thank you for listening to my story. Please consider subscribing for more tales like this.